You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, you're just like exhausted to your bones, but your brain has decided to host this unsolicited, high-stakes midnight symposium.
Oh, yeah, a classic.
Right. Cortisol is just pooling in your system. Your heart is literally thumping against the mattress, and you are intensely analyzing a completely mundane email you sent 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it is the classic symptom of a nervous system that has just completely lost its tether to the present moment.
Yeah.
Your body is technically resting, but your threat detection center is operating as if you are, currently running from a predator.
Or maybe it hits you during the day, right? Like you find yourself chronically multitasking, chronically late to every meeting, maybe knocking your shoulder into doorways because you just feel like you're hovering a few inches outside of your own physical body.
Exactly. That daytime floating feeling or, that midnight panic, they actually both stem from the exact same root issue.
Which is what exactly?
You are experiencing profound dysregulation. Like your mind and your physical environment are occupying two completely different realities.
And bridging that gap, getting those realities to align, is the mission of our deep dive today. We've pulled together this really fascinating stack of sources to figure out how to just, pull ourselves back down to earth.
Yes, a very eclectic stack, actually.
Yeah, we're looking at evolutionary science papers from the John Templeton Foundation, clinical psychology insights from Good Company Therapy Group, medical research out of UCLA, and even some holistic wellness frameworks from outlets like Holisticism and Avocado Green.
It really is a sweeping range of material. I mean, going from hard genetics to spiritual disciplines.
It's wild.
But our goal here is to extract the actual functional science behind three of the most, pervasive wellness buzzwords of the last decade, which are grounding, mindfulness, and gratitude.
Right.
We are stripping away the fluff to figure out the hardcore psychology of how these tools actually anchor you in a chaotic world.
Okay, let's unpack this because people throw mindfulness and grounding around like they are just synonyms. You see it all over social media.
Like constantly.
But according to the clinical therapy sources, treating these two concepts as interchangeable is, well, it's not just wrong. It can actually make your anxiety significantly worse.
Yeah, they're completely different mechanisms.
Much sure.
Completely. To understand why, we first have to look at what mindfulness actually is, like in a clinical sense.
Right.
Mindfulness is the practice of turning your attention entirely inward. You're sitting with your thoughts, you're observing your emotions, and you're just watching your internal narrative unfold without judging it.
Which, I mean, on a calm Tuesday afternoon sounds incredibly healthy.
Sure.
But the therapy groups point out a major trap here. If your nervous system is already in distress-like, if you are in the middle of a panic response or spiraling into heavy anxiety, mindfulness forces you to sit quietly in a room with your absolute most terrifying thoughts.
Exactly. When your internal fire alarm is blaring, turning your attention inward just amplifies the sound of the siren.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, your brain is already convinced you are in danger, so just observing those thoughts, it just provides more fuel for the panic.
It's like feeding the fire.
Right. In moments of acute distress, the absolute last thing you should do is look inward. You need to look outward. You need grounding.
So think of it this way. Mindfulness is like popping the hood of your car to carefully analyze why the engine is smoking. Grounding is grabbing the steering wheel and swerving to the shoulder so you don't crash into a ditch.
That's a great way to put it.
You cannot run a diagnostic test on the engine while you are, careening down the highway at 80 miles an hour.
No, definitely not. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, pulling the car over works because of how our biology processes information. Grounding intercepts that anxiety loop by demanding high levels of sensory input from your physical environment.
Meaning your brain only has so much bandwidth at any given second, right?
Precisely that. I mean, the human brain has a finite amount of processing power. When you're panicking, all that power is completely devoted to the internal threat.
Yeah.
But if you force your brain to process tactile physical data, like the temperature of the room or the texture of your clothing, it actually has to steal resources away from the panic loop to process that new sensory information.
So you settle the nervous system by essentially overloading its capacity to panic.
Exactly. You give it a new job to do.
The Times of India source actually breaks down a really brilliant, highly actionable way to force this sensory override. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
It was a very popular technique.
So the next time you feel the panic rising, you stop whatever you're doing and name 5 things you can visually see in the room.
Then you find 4 things you can physically touch. And you really notice the texture, the temperature, the weight of them.
Three things you can hear, tuning into that, subtle background noise.
Two things you can smell.
And one thing you can taste. By doing this, you're hijacking your brain's processing center. You are forcing the amygdala, the fear center, to realize, wait, I am sitting in a solid chair. The floor is beneath my feet. Like I am physically safe.
Yeah. So understanding that grounding relies on that tactile connection to the physical world, we really have to look at the flip side, like what is actually happening to us when we lose that connection.
Right.
Our holistic sources provide a really interesting framework for what being ungrounded looks like in our daily behavior.
Yeah, the holisticism article describes the state as having an excess of air or water energy, which is, that sensation of living entirely inside your own imagination or your anxieties, just totally divorced from the physical plane.
And it manifests in behaviors that we so often misdiagnose as just personality flaws.
Oh, totally.
For some, it looks like a severe type A perfectionist loop, where you're obsessing over future scenarios that honestly haven't even happened yet.
And for others, it swings the completely opposite way into complete disorganization. Like they bring up chronic lateness as a prime symptom.
Yes.
If you are ungrounded, you aren't just being inconsiderate to your friends, right? Your brain has actually lost its ability to judge the physical reality of time and space.
Right. You think a 20-minute drive will take 5 minutes because you aren't tethered to the physical constraints of reality.
Yeah, you might even find yourself constantly dropping things or, like I said earlier, walking into tables because your spatial awareness is just completely offline.
The prescription for this is to forcefully bring the brain back into the body. And grounding doesn't mean becoming, dull or immobile. It means tactile reconnection.
Okay, so what does that look like?
It can be as simple as eating a dense, warm meal, which forces blood flow down to your digestive system. Or just walking barefoot in the grass to stimulate the nerve endings in the bottom of your feet.
They also mention organizing the physical clutter on your desk or nightstand, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, that is a crucial biological hack because visual noise translates directly into nervous system noise.
Wow, really?
Yeah. When your eyes scan a room filled with unpredictable clutter, your brain processes that environment as chaotic and potentially unsafe. So the physical, tactile act of clearing a surface sends a direct signal of order and predictability right back to your nervous system.
But hold on, if we completely eliminate all that airy, intuitive energy by getting super grounded, don't we risk losing our creativity?
It's a common fear.
The author in the holisticism piece worried about this too. I mean, nobody wants to become a heavy, boring tree trunk entirely bogged down in the mundane physical world. We need our heads in the clouds sometimes to dream and, create.
It is a highly common concern, but grounding doesn't destroy the soaring creative parts of your mind. Think of grounding as building a heavy reinforced runway.
A runway.
Yeah, your creative brain needs to take flight, but it cannot stay in the air forever. Without a solid runway to land on, you eventually crash.
I like that.
And our source from Avocado Green magazine beautifully illustrates how to build this runway in our daily lives by creating what they call cozy family sanctuaries.
Which honestly sounds like an interior design trend, but they argue it's functional biology.
It is entirely biological. Soft textures, weighted blankets, warm, low-level lighting. These aren't just aesthetic choices. When your skin feels a heavy, soft texture, it signals the nervous system that you are protected.
Huh.
It creates an environment where the body feels secure enough to finally drop its guard.
So we have these physical interventions, right? The 5-4-3-2-1 method, walking in the dirt, organizing our space. But our sources reveal another tool that acts as this profound psychological grounding mat, and that is gratitude.
Yeah. We really have to completely discard the cultural notion that gratitude is just like good manners or writing polite thank you notes.
Right.
Gratitude is a biological intervention. It physically alters the chemistry of your body.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Both the UCLA Health Studies and Avocado Green emphasize that practicing gratitude acts as a direct trigger for the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
That is your rest and digest network, the literal brake pedal for your body's stress response.
Exactly. When you are stressed or ungrounded, your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response is dominating, your heart rate variability drops, and your adrenal glands are just pumping out cortisol.
And gratitude intervenes by just shifting your cognitive focus.
Yeah. It gently redirects the brain's attention away from scarcity, threat, isolation, and points it toward connection, safety, and abundance.
The physical metrics of that shift are stunning, by the way. UCLA researchers found that a consistent gratitude practice directly lowers diastolic blood pressure.
It's amazing.
It reduces the circulation of stress hormones. It even reduces biomarkers for cellular inflammation. I mean, how is a thought doing all of that?
Well, it really comes down to the brain-body connection. When your brain registers a feeling of genuine thankfulness, it signals the hypothalamus to shut down the production of those stress hormones.
Okay.
Without that constant wash of cortisol, your immune system functions better, inflammation drops, and your blood vessels literally relax, which lowers the blood pressure. It is a massive physiological pause button.
Which totally explains why it is heavily recommended as a sleep aid. Like, if you are stuck on that midnight anxiety loop, practicing gratitude actively short-circuits the rumination.
Exactly. And Michelle Grosser's morning meditation practice, which we reviewed, synthesizes these two concepts brilliantly. She doesn't just treat grounding and gratitude as like separate chores.
Right, she links them. You start the meditation by visualizing roots growing from your body deep into the earth. So you establish the physical safety first.
All right.
And the moment you feel anchored, you immediately shift your mind to find one single thing you are thankful for. Not to force a toxic positivity mindset, but to purposefully invite calm energy rather than frantic urgency into the start of your day.
But if gratitude possesses this much power over our biology, it raises a massive question, like where did this come from?
Yeah.
Why is the human animal uniquely wired to heal itself through thankfulness? The evolutionary science papers from the John Templeton Foundation take us deep into our biological history to answer that.
And we are diving into the behavior of chimpanzees and vampire bats, which is wild to me.
It sounds strange, I know, but evolutionary biologists trace the roots of gratitude back to a survival mechanism called reciprocal altruism.
Okay.
In the animal kingdom, you sometimes see an animal perform a really costly behavior to help another unrelated member of its species. They do this because they possess an instinctual understanding that the favor will likely be returned when they are the ones in danger.
The vampire bat example in the Templeton research blew my mind. Like, a vampire bat will starve to death if it doesn't feed for 48 hours, right?
Yes, it is a razor-thin margin for survival.
But researchers observed that a bat who successfully found food will actually regurgitate some of its meal to feed a starving, completely unrelated bat.
It is nature's original insurance policy, and the bat receiving the food remembers who helped them. So the next time the roles are reversed, they repay the debt. Gratitude is the psychological ledger that keeps track of these social debts.
Wow.
It is the emotion that drives cooperation, turning competitors into allies.
And the Templeton research points out that this ledger is literally baked into our DNA. They highlight two specific genetic variations that dictate how readily a human being feels gratitude.
Yeah, they looked at the CD38 gene, which plays a massive role in the regulation of oxytocin, our primary bonding and love hormone. They also looked at the COMT gene, which helps manage dopamine in the brain. Small variations in these genetic codes can actually make someone biologically predisposed to notice the good things happening to them, while others might, struggle to feel that same level of thankfulness.
Wait, before we keep going, when we talk about the brain processing this, the
Right.
research mentions the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or VMPFC.
Yes, the VMPFC.
That is a dense clinical term. What is that part of the brain actually doing when we feel grateful?
Think of the VMPFC as the brain's social and moral calculator. It evaluates risk, fear, and decision-making, but it is heavily involved in understanding the intentions of other people.
Okay.
So when someone helps you, your VMPFC goes to work evaluating that interaction. When it determines that someone went out of their way to benefit you, it triggers a reward cascade. It makes you feel good about the other person, which reinforces the social bond.
Which perfectly aligns with the theory proposed by psychologist Sarah Algo. She calls it the find, remind, bind theory of gratitude.
Yes, it is a functional explanation for why the emotion exists. Gratitude helps us find new people who are cooperative and safe.
Right.
It serves to remind us of the value of our current friends and partners. And it works to bind us to those people through mutual care and affection.
But if this find, remind, bind system is the glue of human society and it's baked into our DNA, why do so many of us struggle to actually feel it? Like, if we have the evolutionary hardware, why are we walking around feeling chronically ungrateful?
What's fascinating here is that alongside that hardware, we have psychological defense mechanisms that completely block the gratitude from registering.
Really?
The Templeton paper isolates several of these barriers. Materialism is a major one, as it forces the brain to constantly scan the environment for what you don't have.
That makes sense.
Narcissism is another. I mean, if you believe you are inherently entitled to everything you receive, you just cannot feel grateful for it.
But the most universal barrier they identified is a concept called headwind-tailwind asymmetry.
Yes, it is a brilliant psychological metaphor. Think about riding a bicycle. When you are pedaling into a fierce headwind, you feel every single ounce of resistance.
Oh, yeah. It's awful.
It's exhausting, and it requires all your attention.
Yeah.
But when you turn around and the wind is at your back, the tailwind, you hardly notice it at all. You just think you are a really great cyclist.
So our brains are hardwired to obsess over the obstacles blowing against us, but we completely ignore the invisible benefits pushing us forward.
Exactly. From a pure survival standpoint, it makes sense. You have to pay attention to the threats, the headwinds, to stay alive.
Sure.
But in modern life, it creates a massive blind spot. We constantly fixate on the traffic jam or this stressful email, but we completely ignore the fact that we have clean drinking water, a comfortable bed, and people who love us. We take the tailwinds entirely for granted.
Knowing that our brains naturally want to ignore the tailwinds, we have to look at how we force ourselves to engage with this practice. Our source from the Impact 360 Institute frames gratitude not just as a wellness hack, but as a rigorous spiritual discipline.
Yes.
And we should note, this specific source approaches the topic from a Christian framework. While we aren't endorsing any specific religious worldview on this deep dive, the psychological mechanisms they describe are deeply compelling.
They really are. They argue that thankfulness requires intentional, forceful effort. They reference research by M.J. Ryan, which highlights a stunning neurological limitation. The human brain cannot process the positive emotion of thankfulness and a negative emotion, like paralyzing fear or rage, at the exact same time.
Wow. So it is a zero-sum game inside your mind.
Completely.
If you are actively using your cognitive power to identify something you are grateful for, the fear and the anger are forced to vacate the premises. There just isn't enough bandwidth to sustain both.
They emphasize this with a quote from theologian Tim Keller, who said, "Gratitude is what you feel, thanksgiving is what you do. It requires action."
And the Templeton research reviewed the effectiveness of different actions, right? Like writing gratitude letters or keeping a journal where you count your blessings.
And there's a massive counterintuitive twist in that research.
Oh, yeah.
In one study, they asked a group to journal their blessings 3 times a week, and another group to do it only once a week. You would assume more is better, right?
Yeah, of course.
But the group doing it 3 times a week actually experienced a decrease in their overall well-being compared to the once-a-week group.
Because it turned into a chore.
Exactly. It is a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation, or habituation. When you force yourself to list things every single day, the brain becomes numb to the practice.
It just becomes white noise.
Right. It loses its novelty and its emotional weight. Doing it just once a week forces you to be intentional and keep the emotional resonance intact.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? How do you take these 3 concepts and actually use them today?
Well,
I think the immediate takeaway is to simply catch yourself in the headwind. The next time you find yourself complaining about an obstacle, pause and actively force your brain to identify one tailwind that is quietly helping you along. You don't need to write a 10-page journal entry. Just force the shift in perspective.
ultimately, the goal of combining these tools, using sensory input to ground your body and gratitude to anchor your mind, is to build psychological resilience.
Yeah.
You are depositing small amounts of calm into an internal bank account. Experts call this building your recovery capital. When a genuine crisis does hit your life, you have a deep reservoir of nervous system regulation to draw from.
We have covered incredible ground today. We started by diagnosing that floating, unmoored feeling and learned how to pull the car over and use the 5-4-3-2-1 method to regain control of our sensory input.
We examined how gratitude drops blood pressure and reduces inflammation, and we traced that biological power back to the life-or-death food sharing of vampire bats.
We looked at the genetics of thankfulness and the profound discipline of using gratitude to evict fear from the brain. But before we wrap up this deep dive, the Templeton research briefly raised an ethical dilemma that we want to leave you with.
Yeah, it is a profound question about the dark side of this biology.
We have established that gratitude is the ultimate evolutionary social glue. It ensures we cooperate and care for one another. But what happens when that biological impulse binds us to the wrong things?
Right. If our brains are wired to reward us with dopamine and oxytocin when someone does us a favor, could that mechanism be manipulated?
Definitely.
Think about an incredibly toxic workplace that chronically underpays and exploits its staff. If management suddenly hands out a small holiday bonus, does our evolutionary gratitude trick us into feeling loyal to a system that is actively harming us?
Or in our personal lives. Could the instinct to feel grateful for rare, isolated moments of kindness compel someone to stay in a deeply unhealthy or abusive relationship?
It forces us to ask where the boundary lies. Where is the line between being a resilient, grounded person who appreciates the tailwinds and being someone whose biology is being leveraged against them?
It is a heavy, fascinating question to explore, but for tonight, if you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 1 a.m. and that mental symposium kicks off again,
Remember that you don't have to engage with the agenda.
feel the physical weight of the blanket. Notice the temperature of the air. Find just one tailwind pushing you forward and let your brain finally rest.